for that. Please rise for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, do we have anyone on the phone this evening? She's remote. Okay. So we have Councillor Auger is remote right now, and Councillor Fazer is gave me a heads up he might be late, so but he will also be online when he joins us. And I'm going to make a couple changes to the agenda tonight. First of all, we have quite a few people here to speak on item C, so we're going to take care of that one first. And then item D, the city manager has asked that we postpone that for now, so we're not going to deal with item D this evening. So with that said, we're going to kick off with item C, which is a resolution authorizing the execution of a grant agreement and restrictive covenant between the AllCare Community Foundation and the City of Grants Pass, and our city attorney, Augustus Ogu, is going to present. Go ahead, Augustus.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. So tonight I have a presentation for you, a very short presentation about the urban campground contract with AllCare. So kind of as a recap, we made some changes to the contract language, and we also left some placeholders in the final draft. And so I want to address the changes that council has approved and the placeholders that are still, excuse me, that are still in the document that I want to see whether council wants to move forward with those or not. So the changes, the first set of changes are in paragraph 1.5, which adds pallet shelter and tiny home to the definition of urban campground. Paragraph 4 states that the dissemination of funds to AllCare will happen within 30 days of approval of the proposed sales contract for the piece of property to be used for the urban campground. Paragraph 11.2 added a word, changed from proceeds to net proceeds to make clear that it's after the sale, after a potential sale of property, net proceeds would be reinvested into affordable housing in Grants Pass. And we also added that the reinvestment of those net proceeds are going to happen within the Grants Pass city limits and the urban growth boundary. So the placeholders that we had, or what's still open for discussion, are the buffer zones in paragraph 6.1. A 1,000-foot buffer if established in a commercial zone, 750 feet if established in a business park zone, and 500 feet if established in an industrial zone. Another placeholder was 6.2, which stated that the real property will be at least 300 feet from a residential zone. There's a possibility that this may eliminate some real estate. And then paragraph 9, we include, there's a placeholder for case management as a primary focus as one of the services that AllCare is going to provide. And then paragraph 12, which is the termination for convenience, has been adapted so it states that no termination for convenience will happen within 3 years following the purchase of the real property. There is a councilor suggestion that it be written into the contract a provision for AllCare to return the initial $1 million investment upon future sale of the property. If this is something that council is interested in, it would require a minor integration in paragraph 11. This change has not been made in the contract. This is for discussion only. This was brought up by one councilor. An example of what the change might look like, this is very preliminary language. And then we would change 11.2 to modify, basically to say that any remaining net proceeds after potential return of that initial investment. This option would give the city more direct control over how the funds are used in the future versus the indirect control that's currently contemplated in the contract. And like I said, this is completely at council's discretion. So the call to action is at council's discretion. The date is at council's discretion. And the call to action is to approve the grant agreement, the restrictive covenant, and the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant between the city and AllCare for the development of an urban campground in Grants Pass. And the alternatives are to make some modifications to any of the 3 documents or to deny the grant agreement, restrictive covenant, and resolution. And with that, I turn it over to council.
Thank you. Council, what questions do you have? Joel?
I had a question to Honorable Sam, if that's appropriate.
I'm sorry?
To Sam,
You just,
Yes.
is that appropriate at this time?
At this, we should probably wait
I
until
think
we're
just
getting
questions
into...
for Augustus at the
Oh,
moment.
for Augusta, okay, thank you.
Rick?
Thank you, Augustus. On the second slide, you're showing council changes on paragraph 4, dissemination of funds within 30 days of approval.
Yes.
Was the original contract indicated upon, and I'm sort of recalling, upon purchase of the property, then they would be reimbursed within 30 days of that? Or how was the original contract?
What was in the original contract?
Yes.
The original contract did say 30 days. There had been discussion amongst council whether that time period should be reduced to 14 days, whether it should be eliminated altogether because of the city's ability to pretty much send the funds over quickly. We were able to reimburse them pretty quickly. But the decision was made to leave it at 30 days just to give the city some buffer time. Just because it says 30 days doesn't mean it's going to take 30 days for the money to be transferred.
Okay, and I'm just confirming for clarification purposes that AllCare still has to purchase the property or have a sales contract for the property before we disperse any funds to them?
That's correct. So
Okay.
the council's going to see a proposed sales agreement beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
Rob, then Valerie?
So Augustus, on slide 4, talking about a potential sale of the property and AllCare returning the initial $1 million.
Yes.
So we'd be potentially passing through the state grant. We're using the state grant that's earmarked for a specific purpose that we began giving to AllCare. So if the city were to get that back, how soon would we have to redistribute that for the for the original purpose?
You know, that's a good question, Councillor. Based on the DAS agreement that we received from the state, it is unclear. It's actually silent on that. I'm not sure that the DAS agreement contemplated giving money, $1 million, to an entity for homeless alleviation or an urban campground or something to prevent homelessness, and down the road recouping that investment. I don't think the contract said anything about that.
I would imagine it'd be an assumption that we'd have to use it for a similar purpose, or the intended purpose. So I guess we just don't know how long, what the time requirement would be or anything like that.
That's correct. If we're going to be going by the spirit of the contract that we signed with the state, yes,
Right.
those funds would have to be used for affordable housing in Grants Pass.
Okay. Thank you.
Valerie?
Isn't that currently what we asked AllCare to do as well? I mean, that is in the contract, that if they do sell it, that money needs to be used for the purposes of affordable housing. Am I correct?
That's correct. And so I suppose the rationale behind this particular request was so that council would have more direct control over how the funds are used. When it comes to what AllCare may decide down the road is appropriate for affordable housing, it's something that council is obviously going to have a say in pursuant to the contract, but it's just really changing the degree of control, right? You're changing the degree of control of the funds. So if under this scenario, council were to decide that AllCare should repay the initial $1 million investment while taking the rest of that money and using it for affordable housing or for whatever purpose they deem necessary or something that they want to do. The city would have that initial $1 million investment to reinvest somewhere else. You can choose different partners. You can choose the same partner, honestly, and do a completely different project. The main difference is that council would have more control over those funds.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I have another question, and that goes back to on slide 3, where you talk about paragraph 6.2. I think this was kind of the bone of contention, at least the last time we talked about it. The real property will be at least 300 feet from a residential zone. So, and I know that with that, what we run across is that it erases a lot of possible land for the purpose of the urban campground. So I just wanted to clarify that right now, it's not allowed in a residential zone, correct?
That is correct.
And it is only allowed in a commercial, business park, or industrial zone. And that the buffers that we so far have set is 1,000 feet from a school, traditional private, 750 feet from a business park, 700 feet in a business park from the school, or 500 feet in an industrial zone from a traditional public or private school. Am I correct?
Yes.
And that the other little piece here that we're talking about was if indeed we had it in a business zone, that we're looking for some sort of parameter so that it's not doesn't back right up to a residential property. Am I correct?
That was my understanding of the initial provision, yes.
And so that's why we came up with 300, but that was something that we were going to have a larger discussion on. Am I correct?
Yes, that was my understanding as well. So these were, this provision in 6.2 was left in as a placeholder, same as paragraph 9, paragraph 12.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So that is the placeholder that is up for discussion.
It is, and just to add to that, Councilor Lovelace, is the foundation at one point was having a discussion with council about the potential of changing the buffer zones in business park and industrial and shrinking those a little bit also, but that was no additional direction from council was provided to do so. So you see the numbers that you see in front of you.
Okay. So let me make sure what you just said. They wanted to change these numbers, or these were the numbers that other than the 300 feet, I know that.
These were the numbers that originally, when Augustus and I met with the foundation, we came up with this sliding scale based on zones and uses. Okay. And then when the foundation did come and have a small discussion with council at a workshop, looking at finding potential sites, looking in the industrial zones of the city, they discovered there were still some potential buffer issues with some properties associated with the 750-foot buffer zone in a business park zone that they were wanting council to consider maybe shrinking.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Rick, then Brian.
So Augustus, on those setbacks, if we're comfortable with those as stated, if the applicant brings in a piece of property that does not meet those, do we have the ability to grant a variance, or would there some way other than changing the actual requirement?
The way that the contract's drafted right now doesn't leave very much room for discretion unless the contract is modified by both of the parties.
Okay, so if that situation did occur, we could modify the contract at a later date?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Brian.
Yeah, a couple things. I think there's, first of all, just kind of a semantic thing. There's AllCare Health and there's AllCare Community Foundation, and I'm seeing in the contract and in the slides, it's just saying AllCare, which can be confusing. So I would maybe suggest that we, change the terminology to ACCF or AllCare Foundation as opposed to AllCare in all of the documentation we're using. Just as kind of a side note. But my question is regarding all the buffers that we have established now. We have 1,000 feet in commercial, 750 in business park, 500 in industrial, 300 in residential, 100 feet from daycare, 300 feet from recreational facilities. And then, I'm actually not seeing the one related to schools on here.
So, I'm sorry, just the one for the schools is actually the very first part in 6.1, where it says the real property shall be buffered from any traditional public or private school. And then it lists those 3 buffers in those respective zones.
I see, okay. And then when we talked about the 300 feet from the residential zone, that was a new buffer that came up in our last meeting. And at the end of that last meeting, I think it was decided that we were going to have GIS available to see what different distance of buffer how many properties that would eliminate. So I was wondering if staff was ready to show that tonight or show us what that looks like, because we had talked about that.
So we were without GIS since that recommendation from council to take a look at that, literally having no GIS staff. We just hired our GIS staff person this week. But when we took a look at the mapping and what a buffer zone on residential would do, it would drastically reduce the potential options for property, as residential is so dispersed throughout the zones. And so looking at a buffer, if you were to try to have a residential buffer that ultimately kept properties open for consideration, you'd need to look at a very minimal buffer zone from residential, say 50 feet, 100 feet. Anything more than that would drastically reduce any ability to find a site location.
Thank you.
And I'd also just like to point out, in both the contract and in the restrictive covenant, excuse me, it makes clear that the contract is between the City of Grants Pass and the AllCare Community Foundation. And what happens is throughout the contract, instead of spelling out AllCare Community Foundation, it just refers to them as the grantee, as in the entity that's going to be receiving the money. And the same thing is done in the restrictive covenant. So I suppose my question would be, would it be council's desire to change the word grantee to ACCF throughout both documents?
Well, I'm just seeing in the restrictive covenant that it says AllCare, 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 AllCare. It doesn't say grantee under all the numbered items, so.
Right, so under the second whereas in the restrictive covenant, it makes clear that the city has entered into a agreement with AllCare Community Foundation, and that's in parentheses, AllCare, which is used throughout the rest of the restrictive covenant. So would you like staff to go back and change the restrictive covenant to say grantee instead of AllCare, although it is noted in that second whereas that you're dealing with AllCare Community Foundation? And it also says in the first recital under now therefore, that the above recitals and the grant agreement, including all definitions and terms in the grant agreement, are incorporated by reference. So that brings the agreement itself into the restrictive covenant and makes it part of this restrictive covenant.
Yeah, I know we're not in the comment phase, but I think that either having it say grantee or ACCF would just be more clear for anyone that's reviewing the document. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay. This item is open for public comment, and I know that there are a number of people here who wanted to speak on this tonight. You each have 3 minutes to speak. There is a green light that will turn to yellow. When it turns to yellow, you have 30 seconds left, and when the red light goes off, please stop your comments so that I don't have to interrupt you. I just want to remind everyone that this meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members are allowed to state their opinions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, and other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. And with that said, who would like to speak first? Go ahead and step up to the mic and make sure it's on, please.
Testing.
It's good, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I do want to ask, well, thank you for having me and thank you for taking our input. But I would like to make sure I heard that
Hang on
correctly.
just a second, please say your name first.
My name is Mike Pelfrey. I'm a city resident.
Thank you.
Did I actually hear, as they were talking about these buffer zones, that it said 100 feet from a child care or a daycare? Did I hear that correctly?
It's just an opportunity
Okay,
to.
so I would like the council to confirm that question if you could, because that to me is extremely important. So Mayor and City Council, I would like to address the ever-growing concern with our homeless population. I'm aware that the City of Grants Pass will be donating $1 million for the purchase and development of an urban campground. As a taxpaying city resident, I would like the city leadership to please answer a few questions. In a recent story from the sneak preview, it was stated that Grants Pass has over 600 homeless within our city limits. Please explain how an urban campground will solve this problem. How does an urban campground alleviate our ever-growing problem with homeless camping within our parks? It was also stated that the City of Grants Pass has roughly only a 1% rental vacancy, which basically means we have very little rentals available out there for anybody, whether you're homeless or you can afford it. So again, please explain how this campground will enable the homeless to transition to a rental when there are no rentals available. Just down the street off of, I believe, 4th, there's a beautiful complex, a beautiful apartment complex. That could have easily been something for affordable housing. Do you know that the average rent over there is $1,950 a month? So I'm pretty sure that the homeless are not going to be able to afford that amount. Perhaps Grants Pass is not the most ideal location for many of these homeless people. If you can't afford the cost of living here in Grants Pass, perhaps Grants Pass is not the right fit. This is reality. When I moved my family from Knoxville, Tennessee to western part of the United States, I knew that many cities were out of the picture because of cost of living. However, and also I knew that a lot of them were not a good fit. We ultimately chose a location that we knew we could afford. It's not rocket science. I keep hearing about how successful the urban campground is in Medford. Please feel free to share this success. I just went down to Medford yesterday and I can confirm that there are homeless people in every direction. The homeless are still living and trashing their Bear Creek pathway. The homeless are living all over the local parks in Medford and Portland. And of course, Portland has an urban campground. Please share the success of the Portland homeless problem as well. Guess what? You can't. Finally, a group of local citizens, and I'll finish with this. We just had a meeting not too long ago where citizens came in this very chamber. We haven't even had an opportunity to do our jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, anyone else wanting to speak on this issue? If you have public comment about other issues, there'll be an opportunity for that later on too. Please state your name.
Hello, my name is Indra Nicholas. I live in the city right a few blocks from here. I'm a longtime resident of Grants Pass. We moved here to raise our kids in a wonderful, safe environment, and it had been for many years. I'm sure most of you have seen what's happened to our beautiful city. I wouldn't even raise kids here anymore. It's not safe. I live right up near 4th and A. Homeless travel back and forth right in front of my house every day. I work up at the north end of town. I own a business. Homeless are there every day, trashing, leaving trash. It's disgusting. I understand what you're trying to do, and I understand the money from the city is supposed to go to this campground so that then you're able to get people off the street. And if that would work, I would say yes, but I'm very skeptical of that because no one does anything about it. Our city leaders have done nothing as far as I can see. And so if this campground is like the wonderful best way to clean up our city, to get them out of the parks, to get them out of the businesses, to get them out of our woods and going by our homes and our neighborhood, then I'm all for it. But I don't feel that this is the right answer. And if you decide to do this, it needs to be as far out as possible. And I don't know if it needs to be in the city. Can city own or can the property be out in the county? It cannot be near businesses, not even 1,000 feet. It cannot be near residential areas, not even. I was shocked at this 100 feet for our children, our most vulnerable population, seniors and children, and yet the lowest buffer is for kids in daycare. I'm really shocked at that. If they have to be near services, then why can't I would pay money for a bus to bus them into the city if they want to. The other thing is, how about criteria? I talked to the homeless. A homeless girl came up, and my house sits back from the sidewalk. This happened a couple of days ago. Came up to my door and rang my doorbell to ask for work. I was home alone. This is a dangerous situation, and it needs to be resolved. So I would ask there would be criteria. They need to work. I talked to them. They're so happy. They make more money than me. I couldn't pay myself 2 years for my business the last 2 years. They're getting money from the state. They're getting trail food cards. They don't want to work, most of them. Plus the addiction problem. If that was my daughter, I wouldn't want her living in an urban
Time,
campground. I would want you to get her
We need everybody
off the
to respect
street
the 3 minutes.
and
Thank
help.
you.
Thank you.
Is there somebody else who wanted to speak on this? Please step forward and tell your name.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Brenda Sisson. I am a county resident, but I do come to town. Yesterday, I tried to go to the bank, to the ATM on F and 6th, and this homeless guy is camping in the enclave of where the ATM is. And I went to the city police department and requested him to be removed, which they did very promptly. Thank you very much. These people are not pets. You can't build something and expect them to stay in those perimeters like they're pets. They're individual, independent people that have problems. And however they got this way, if their problem is their problem. And the more we try to help, the deeper their problems are going to become. They have no self-worth, and they have no self-purpose. And if you try to house them in a perimeter of wherever and whatever you want to give them, the farther out they go, that's not relevant because they have to have food and accessibility to social means, such as whatever, bathrooms and such, social, streets. I see them laying down in the hallways and the byways and in front of the doors of our businesses right downtown. I cannot walk downtown any longer in the evening and enjoy the wonderful days of Grants Pass. It's dangerous. If you admit you have no solution for these people, there are no solutions anywhere. Any town, any tiny house, any tiny whatever. There are no solutions for these people. You can't put them on taxpayers' expense. Why not take that $1 million and apply it to health care to get them off the street in that way? Offer them something to give them some kind of what do you call that? Self-respect? Purpose? Instead of trying to house them in an acreage? Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I appreciate the eye contact, I really do. Because I'm serious about this. The less we give them, the more they're going to have to seek on their own with their happiness. Did I mention that I used to be homeless? I was homeless, and I became a truck driver that lasted 29 years. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Just step on up and state your name. You don't have to wait to be called on. If more efficient if people make a little line and move.
Hello, I'm Heidi Napier. I recently emailed all of you guys with a story about being accosted and threatened by a guy downtown, and praise God, 2 cops came along. Thank you very much. At just the right moment, and this guy was very threatening. He lunged at me, he lunged at my dog, and he was quite a bit bigger than I am, which isn't saying much, but it was scary. So I don't know if he was homeless or drugged or both, but you know, if you set up a homeless campground, you are encouraging and attracting more of these kind of people. We do not need them. They can go to the Gospel Rescue Mission, they can get a job, they can do something. They don't need to be wandering around threatening little old ladies like me, okay? And I have a feeling that you folks are trying to shove something down the throats of Grants Pass people that if you put it to a vote, I don't think it would pass. Maybe you should try that, you know, put it to a popular vote, see how many people want the planned homeless camp.
Anybody else? Please come forward and state your name. Anybody?
Good evening, Councilor and Mayor. I'm Kathy Millard, and I'm here to request that you please not sign and release funds to AllCare contract. We the people feel duped on a 2-day workshop to get things together and resolve this issue of homeless or houseless. We feel the $1 million could go toward affordable housing instead of a low barrier shelter. A low barrier shelter is a low protection shelter for vulnerable people. This will not fix the problem of them that do not want to go to the shelter. This money could build a lot of homes. The money spent at the high school commons in the winter when it was snowing, $750 a night per person for 26 people, 2 nights, $39,000. That could have, again, money not well spent to fix the problem, as well as ongoing cost. Please give your citizens that live here a chance to work this out, maybe 30 days to come back with you with some solutions to redirect the money. Let us put our workshop and get people working toward a better solution, and maybe we can find some land and get some contractors to afford some housing, affordable, and that will fix the problem. Also, we are a tourist town. We have use that card. This is not going to attract people to our town with this kind of situation going on. It's not attractive at all. And our business people do depend on tourism. Thank you, and I know this is very difficult, but I think we can work together as a town, and our cops are doing a great job. They deserve a lot of respect.
Larry West, Grants Pass. I'd like to speak for the Voice at a real low estimate of 500 people. And I'm talking about the Sportsman Club that we just had with the county, where they wanted to take that out of the public jurisdiction because it could be viewed as a park, Sportsman's Park. And that might attract homeless people. In fact, the public did not want that change. But as soon as the issue of the homeless came up, the entire persona of all those people, and again, I'm talking at least a minimum of 500 people when I'm speaking for them at 5 different meetings, rebelled against the idea of a homeless population because drugs and trash and people using the facilities didn't mix with bullets and alcohol and those kinds of things. So it didn't make sense to keep that in the public domain. So the county commissioners made the right decision, and I hope you weigh in on this because it should be your decision too, thinking along these lines, that homeless didn't have a place there. In order to get out of the public domain, they put it into basically the private domain. And that solved the problem of homeless taking that over because they could, because of their numbers and, of course, the legal status of what they have now. So I wanted to bring that to your attention and weigh in that. That's a lot of weight of a lot of people who aren't in this audience tonight. But you need to consider that because it's the same issue. And I don't think putting them anywhere in a city is going to be the answer. And even though the parameters sound good, and it really is a lot of courtesy you're giving to the public with this presentation, I understand it and I see it. But the bottom line, the bigger issue that's really affecting the people the most is what needs to be addressed. And it's not going to be taken care of with what I've seen presented here. It's going to be a lot of conflict. Thank you.
Anybody else? Step right up.
My name is Tim Minchell. I live in Merlin, Oregon, and I didn't hear anything about the standards. What are the behavioral standards of these people moving into the camp? What is it? What if they cause problems to the neighbors next door, or they start stealing, or they're openly using drugs? What are the standards? I never heard anything from you folks or anybody here. What are the standards? That's the most important thing. The Gospel Rescue Mission has standards. It works. It gets people's lives back, get people off the street. I know they can only take so much. And most of these people that are homeless don't want help. They just want to continue doing what they're doing. But some do. It'd be nice to get some of those people that want to get help, give them something to do. Give them a low-paying job, picking up trash, cleaning up the city. The ones that get work have self-respect. They build their own self-esteem. And I think that's the key to getting better, is actually working and earning your keep. Other than that, it's a black hole. And I think the people should vote on this. I don't think the city council or the mayor should vote on it. I think the people of Grants Pass only, if it's going to be in their district, should vote on this. Thank you very much.
Step on up.
My name is Vivian Kirkpatrick Pilger. Nice to meet you, Mr. LaGrange, Mr. Collins, Mr. Riker, Ms. Lovelace, Mr. Pell, Mr. King, Mayor Bristol, City Manager Kubik, City Attorney Ogu, Finance Rowley, Community Development Clark, Policeman. They don't even put your name up there. Yeah, he should have his name up there. And Public Works candidate and the young lady over there. I don't come to these meetings very often because I find them pretty useless, because when you come and you give your ideas, pretty much they're just overlooked and you go do what you want to do anyway. The council does, and it's pretty much most governing bodies do. But I felt compelled to come here tonight because I work across the street. Don't work, I volunteer across the street at the Republican Party headquarters. And I do that 4 days a week, 3 hours a day. Sometimes I'll be there real late at night and I lock the front door. But recently, probably in the last year, I've noticed a much greater number of homeless people running up and down, well, not running, but cruising up and down 6th Street. And one night I was there and it was, I don't know, 7 o'clock, and I was just running some numbers, and I hear this bang, bang, bang on the front door, and somebody like trying to pull the front door open. And there's a rail on the front door. And I went around there because I thought it was one of our folks. And it was this homeless man, and he was kind of crazy out of his mind. And of course I wasn't going to unlock the door. And I said, "We're closed." And he said, "Open this door." And he started screaming at me. And I said, "Go away or I will call the police." And he goes, "I'll be here before the police get here." you know, and he says, open the door before I break it down. And I just went into my office and I called the police. So he suddenly disappeared. I don't know where he went, but I was afraid to go out to my car, which was parked directly in front of the building. And so I called my husband and he came down and he sat there while I got in my car. We didn't see anybody. But that's not the first time that's happened. That's happened a couple of times. And we've had people unpacking their gear and leaning up against the front door of our building in a little alcove. You know, you've probably all seen the building. And just sort of unpacking their stuff like they're going to camp there. And we tell them, no, you need to move along. And they say, well, we have a right to be here. And I say, no, you don't. It's a private property. So I think the yellow thing means I have 26 seconds left. I don't think that you guys are approaching this in the right manner. At least not for my welfare, and certainly not for the people of Grants Pass. I know you've probably tried a lot of things, but don't give $1 million to AllCare to solve your problem. I mean, that just seems like you're dumping it on them to go find some place to do this. And I haven't read all of the back of the paperwork, but it says somewhere in there that you have to have a certain percentage of, certain percent of, what do I press?
Sorry, there's no restart. That's your time.
I've got 13 seconds, but there's nothing in the contract that tells me that we'll ever get out of that contract again, because it has to be under 20% of occupation of the.
Oh, I see. It just keeps beeping.
It just keeps going.
Yeah, your time is up. Thank you for your comments. Is there somebody
do it
else
differently.
who
Thank
wanted
you.
to speak? Anybody else who wanted to speak on this issue tonight? Go ahead, come on up and state your name.
Hello, Mark Collier from Grants Pass. I'd like to see the term urban campground mold into navigation center. I think with the addition of the term case management, and I think Sam would agree that you're slowly, Grants Pass is behind Medford, you're behind Ashland, you're behind Roseburg, you'll soon be behind Cave Junction, the last to put money into this type of facility. And it's because of the NIMBYism that you hear again and again and again. I came here and I knew about it because I got a flyer from a certain Republican party that said, come set your hair on fire and just fall to pieces. And that's what you see here. But you don't see an effort to bring people out of the park, which is what they want. But they want them all out of the park at once. So some of you, Brian, Vanessa, Mayor Bristol, you've come down with me to the park and we've done what we can. I know you've been down there, Councillor King. And we've seen what we've seen. We've also worked at the, with St. Vincent de Paul on the old DMV building for the warming center. I think you do need to do this. And I don't think you're gonna get it because I don't think $1 million is enough. I think the buffers are gonna keep you out of it. But if you look at the Gospel Rescue Mission, you ask yourself, okay, if you applied those buffers to the Gospel Rescue Mission, would it even work? Because as soon as you show up at the Gospel Rescue Mission, you have nicotine on your voice or your body, you're kicked out. Then you're part of the homeless situation again. So how does that even work? The people that come into these urban campgrounds, navigation centers, are already screened. You know this. Before they come in, they're screened, and they're not going to be a problem just because they're within some certain buffer distance. They weren't a problem when they were at the warming center at the old DMV building. That wasn't a problem for 60 nights in a row. There were no police calls. Okay, the only time we got police calls was when people heard about it from Medford, came up here on the bus, thought free food. So these guys were kicked out of the Kelly Center. They're not allowed here, and they went along. I hope you do this. I hope you do it unanimously. It took 2.5 years for you to come to an agreement to put a porta potty in not far where someone placed one 2.5 years ago. And it was moved with only 2 hours and 30 minutes, and it was gone. My money was gone. And I had a lost cause, but 2 years later, there it is again. So you made the right decision, but it took 4 of you 2 years before you came around and said, yes, a porta potty's better than nothing. So if a porta potty's better than nothing, you're going in the right direction. This case management, this definition of a navigation center, it's House Bill 4001. Defines a navigation center as a low-barrier emergency shelter that operates 7 days a week, connects individuals with families, with health services, permanent housing, public benefits, and then it goes on from there. It opened in 2017, won another state. It's a low-barrier, service-enriched shelter targeting high-needs adults experiencing homelessness homelessness. They're living in encampments, yes, but it's not going to be a campground. So I wouldn't burn your hair like some have.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Please step forward and state your name.
Well, hello, everybody. It's Cindy Auger, and I've been hearing a lot of upsetting stories. I also have experienced the homeless issues. I mean, sometimes I go to my work, I can't even get into my work, I have to call a cop. Can you please get him out of the doorway so I can go into work? So this is the deal. It's complicated, but it seems to me that when they were in the park, not that that's an ideal place, they were in one location, and everybody more or less knew where they were at. Boatnet came, they all moved, and that's fine. But if we don't do something, we're going to have the definition of insanity over and over again. And if you don't want to see all the homeless people around, get them in a camp, get them segregated, who's the good ones that really need the help, who's the ones that have drug problems, so on and so forth. Doing nothing is not a solution, and I support you guys in going forward with this. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Debbie Riaza, and I'm a new Grants Pass resident. We live out by Griffin Park. And so we didn't move to this beautiful town of Grants Pass to find out that we're moving into a homeless shelter area. That's not what our retirement plan was. So we really hope that all of you can find a better decision for this. I mean, the $1 million can go a long way to mental health care for these folks. That would be our good suggestion, not just give them a place to stay. And I'm a volunteer at the St. Vincent de Paul mobile kitchen across the way. And so I want to be supportive, but I don't want to enable, and I don't want to attract more people here that are not able to live in this community as tax-paying, working individuals. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, I'm going to close public comment and turn this over to council for discussion. Brian, go ahead. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. One more here.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Yonley. I called a meeting about 3 years ago regarding the homeless situation, and approximately 85 people showed up, all of them interested and caring. What kind of community do we want to have? What kind of heart do we have? What do we show? I would like to encourage folks that may have a lot of fear or concern to maybe get involved in the homeless count next year. I have done that a couple of times, and the stories are as different as every one of us are. One gentleman had worked for 40 years, lost his job, lost his home, was living in his truck, trying to find a place to get a shower because he couldn't present to even attempt to get another job because he had problems. That was one. There were many, many others, many children that were, I would say, victims. They were born at the wrong time, the wrong place, not their fault. I think communities are built from the heart up. And if we don't do that, what are we? What kind of community? How can we be proud of Grants Pass, Josephine County, when we don't even acknowledge openly and comfortably that we have a challenge and see it more as a challenge than a problem? Having these time's up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I just want to note for the record that Councilor Fazer did join us shortly after we started the meeting here, so we have 2 councilors online. Oh, more public comment. Okay, go ahead.
And I'll hurry. And I made a promise I was not going to speak, but it's too hard sitting here not speaking. Bottom line, Nancy Onley.
Please state your name.
Oh, my name is Geneva Matson. Most of you know me. Some people here know me. When Nancy spoke, I went to that meeting, and some of you were at that meeting, and this town was gung-ho on helping with this. I don't want to complain. I have somehow quasi-backed out of burnout. The problem, and I have a right to my opinion, is here you all are supportive. Last year this time, and 3 years this time, everything was Nothing got done. The difficulty in this town is we have no resources for mental health. We have the sobering center when they're drunk. We have rents that went sky high. We had people ending up on the street. We have a lot more than a couple of hundred homeless. You all sit here with big hearts. But what's happening that is just bothering me personally, but a lot of other people, we had hundreds of employees way back when. Volunteers, excuse me. Now we still have a handful. We have Sam, we have Doug, we have working their families off. I worked mine off till I got burned out. The biggest thing in a nutshell is you guys, some of you will get reelected, some of you won't, somebody will retire, and we start all over. And the biggest thing that's going on is we need resources, we need mental health. We need land. We have things that could be done, but we have buffers. I agree wholeheartedly. You guys have done a great job. But all we are doing today, and the reason I came tonight, is hopefully for an update from AllCare and Doug and to hear what you guys are up to. Because what's happening is we start over every 6 or 8 months. And when some of you go away next election, we'll have all the new blood with all these wonderful ideas, but nothing is getting done. And personally, I pray to God Almighty, Grants Pass needs help way beyond the brilliance, the geniuses, the intellect, and the power, and the money. But I'm praying that we get help for these people. They are human beings. Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else who wanted to speak before we close public comment? You won't have another opportunity after this. Please state your name.
My name is Winnie. I am here as a concerned citizen. I am not.
What's your last name, Winnie?
I don't have one. My full legal name is Winnie. I oppose the urban campground. I come from a different angle at this. I am the mother of a heroin addict. I have lived that life. I had to learn how to not enable him. It took me a long time. It took me a lot of heartache. Sometimes I didn't think I was going to make it till the next day because of having to face the problems that I did with him. But I did it. I stood strong on that. And not at any point do I want any of you, tax-paying citizens, hardworking people, enabling my son or any other addict, because they are not going to get sober until they are ready. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I am going to officially close public comment, and Brian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions regarding comments that were made, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate for staff or for AllCare, but I thought it'd be good to ask, I think it was Tim asked about the standards and the criteria as far as what are the criteria for someone to get acceptance into the campground? Is there someone here that's capable of answering that question, at least vaguely?
We have our AllCare representatives, AllCare Foundation representatives here.
Yeah, so we intend to contract with Road Retreat to operate it, so we're not the best representatives of how it gets operated. We have been in many meetings with them, so we can sort of shine a little bit of light on that whole subject. So the police, can you hear it? Okay, sorry, Rick. So as far as I understand, there is the police force here in town, which is what is your team called that goes around the community response team? Community resource team will have a large role in suggesting a person go to the campground or not, and who would be appropriate, with an eye towards those that are predatory or are troublemakers, and they wouldn't be allowed there. And the other criteria for Brett, and then Sam, you want to jump in if you can think of something?
Yeah, no drug or alcohol use would be allowed on site. There would be community behavior standards like there are in any other community or any other establishment. Folks who don't behave in accordance with the internal behavioral standards, which are mostly aligned around the safety of the occupants and the safety of the neighbors and the comfort of the neighbors, would be either asked to leave or would be put onto some sort of a behavior plan. And then again, Rogue Retreat is the expert on this, but we could certainly get you that list by email. And then I know that a number of folks here have been on tours of the campground, either in Medford or the Kelly Shelter or other programs.
Great, thank you. And then the second question was around, one gentleman mentioned the term navigation center, and I wasn't sure if either of you are familiar with that particular term, given that we've added, or we're considering adding case management as a primary focus, and I think that we will. Is that a more appropriate term for what this will be than urban campground?
I'd have to review House Bill 4001 because I believe the navigation center is fairly specific, but Roseburg and Medford are both installing navigation centers right now. Medford in partnership with Rogue Retreat, Roseburg with guidance and advisement from Rogue Retreat, and working with UCAN. I think that there was a lot of truth in the comment that Mark Collier made around terminology. And this is something we ran into with other public comment periods too. The term pallet shelter is misunderstood, that a pallet shelter is really more like a tiny house than it is. When people hear pallet, I think a lot of times they do think of like a shanty town or something that's sort of cobbled together out of pallets and tarps. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about prefabricated units that are designed to withstand elements. And they have a good look to them. They look professional and organized. And then the campground, while it would be intended for people to live in something that would be probably legally defined as a campground because of the way that the utilities and things are set up, those little units are really more like a tiny house or more like a yurt in a lot of ways than they are like a tent, which is probably what people are thinking. And then the case management that goes into this is extensive. Again, people are referred through something like the CRT or Medford's livability team. Folks would be engaged with both healthcare. There'd be an attempt to connect them with a primary care provider if they don't have one. Certainly getting them connected with options or other drug and alcohol treatment if they aren't already connected. And then moving them through a case management plan that would be intended to move them into more stable forms of transitional or independent housing.
Thank you.
Can I talk a little bit about the term navigation center? I think there may be some misconceptions. A navigation center, as I understand it, is a place where anyone can go and get guidance and help and direction towards some issue they may have. And so it's sort of an open door to people that can come.
the transitional urban campground won't be that. It won't be just open to anyone, so you can't just go there. You have to be referred there, or you have to sign up in other ways. So there's a little bit of a difference there, and we have to be careful if we use the term navigation center. That doesn't mean they aren't going to be given those same services at the urban campground, but they'll be there because they're referred there.
Thank you.
Valerie, then Kurt.
Yeah, I just have a question, because this is another thing too that we hear with urban campgrounds is that, and the fear of the child care and that sort of thing, it is a fenced facility. Am I correct? I mean, it's
Fenced,
not open.
gated.
It's gated, it is
Fenced,
fenced. Nobody
yes.
wanders in, wanders out.
Well,
They
people
do.
are allowed to leave and
Yes,
come, so they
yes.
do come and go, but it's closed off at night, so they're not coming and going at night unless they have night jobs. But the discussion about the daycare facility with distances, somebody brought that up and thought it was too small of a distance. Daycare facilities children don't walk out of daycare facilities and wander around. They do at schools, they might walk home, and so that's why we set up the distance of 1,000 feet from a school, not a daycare facility.
Right, and I just wanted to clarify that, because daycare is a parent walking in and out, and I've been involved with many daycare, and you do have to check them in and check them out. The kids cannot go in and out on their own, so.
Yep.
So to address Winnie's concern with the case management and the controlled environment, can you in any way consider you're enabling these people, or are you providing them possibility?
I would not think of it as enabling, of providing a place for someone to sleep so that they can work through their issues. I don't see that as enabling, but that's everybody has a different opinion of what that is. So I would say, no, it's not enabling.
Yeah, and I would second that the idea of the campground, because people elect to go into it and they're referred into it, ideally when they're ready or they're a good candidate for that type of living, and that type of living would help prepare them for something like Foundry Village or the Gospel Rescue Mission or another step up out of homelessness. You're creating the opportunity for people to make a change in their life that they're ready for and that they're looking for, rather than the word enabling can have two meanings. You're enabling somebody to continue down a behavioral path that you don't like, or you're enabling somebody to make a change in their life. And so splitting the hairs on the semantics of that, the goal would be giving people the opportunity to move out of homelessness.
Any other questions for Sam or Doug before we move on? Go ahead, Joel.
Well, Sam, I already emailed you my questions, and I didn't want to catch you off guard. In terms of a business plan, this is a different topic than the homeless, and we'll have some comments later on that. But has the foundation put together what the infrastructure is going to cost, in terms of today's inflation? And one of the worst outcomes would be if the town and the council decides to do this, that we financially can't, because there's not money available to build the infrastructure, or there's not money to operate it over the period of time, and which would be a business plan. And so could you enlighten us on what the business plan would be for going forward?
The cost for infrastructure specifically is going to be very site dependent. So some of the sites we've looked at have already had water and sewer on them, and so the cost for upgrading infrastructure would be low. Some of the sites have had buildings on them, which would again make for putting in something like a navigation center or a case management office is much easier. Others have not, and they haven't. Those would have been much more expensive. And so as we're looking at sites, we're taking all of that into consideration.
So do you anticipate the infrastructure costs are going to go beyond the cost of the grant or the value of the grant?
It's hard to say without knowing which site we'd be on.
Yeah.
But then looking at the business model, we'd be taking a page out of Rogue Retreat's book, and then similar to other communities, is the ongoing operations are going to be a combination of donations, state and federal funding, and grants.
Okay.
Reimbursements, yeah, and then also fees. Sometimes there's participant fees. And I don't know that Rogue Retreats has structured the participant fees for the campground yet.
Also, for example, like case management, insurance companies get paid for case management, providing it for Medicaid.
Yeah, case management's a reimbursable cost through OHP. And then as far as having a service fee for program participants, that's having some skin in the game so that they do have an invested stake in their own outcomes as well.
Okay, thank you. I have some comments, but I'll wait till that section.
Okay, yeah, let's have these questions, and then we'll move on to discussion. Any other questions? All right. Thank you to our AllCare representatives.
Thank you.
All right, council discussion. Joel, did you want to start?
Well, I feel inadequate here, but I'm going to do my best. We invested 2 days with people from all across the community, including homeless people. And there was a couple of things that have been highlighted here today that reinforce what was also present at the workshop. The first thing is everybody here cares. Everybody cares. They care about, that's why you're here. They care about Grants Pass, they care about the homeless. A lot of the folks that are on both sides of the issue have experienced it firsthand, and their own individual experience has driven their beliefs and their behavior. And for them, that's what happened. I got a men's breakfast at church, and everybody gives their story periodically, and they trust each other. And I was surprised about 40% of the participants over time, and a lot of us are old, were homeless during their life. So it's not an uncommon experience. The other thing is that no one path or no one stereotype exists of a homeless person, or for that matter, of a community member who's dealing with that issue. We are the permutators of stereotypes. Those people don't want it. These people want it. Those people are enablers. These people don't want to work. There's people, so for example, with the homeless, they have a drug addiction rate about 3 times what the normal population is. Some of them have been addicted after they became homeless because that's how they dealt with the lack of hope. Others, that's what drove them into homelessness, was they got addicted and then they lost their job or their family or whatever. So first thing that I would comment on is stereotypes don't do us any good. We're all in this together. And I think we looked at that at our workshop, and it felt really healthy. The second thing was we asked ourselves 3 questions at the workshop. And it was interesting. By the way, we're going to meet again next Wednesday, and we got 3 different presentations by people. One on the urban campground, one on the why and how they could provide affordable housing, and another one on the need for warming and cooling shelters. Plus, we'll have other topics come up from the participants that we need to look at. But those 3 questions were, first one is, what is the worst thing that can happen if we do nothing? What's happening if we do nothing? Well, we've got this increasing trend of people being confronted in front of their businesses. We got, not just due to homelessness, but due to some of our state laws, increased drug use, including hard drugs. All these trends are accelerating. So to continue on the same path that we're doing, the worst that can happen is it could get even worse. Okay, and that was pretty much a consensus. The other thing was businesses would start to move, people would leave. They couldn't find qualified employees that want to work. The parks would become even more crowded and dirty. The tax base would go down. I mean, you know, and the worst of the worst is that somebody ends up getting killed or whatever. So then the next question we asked ourselves was, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if we do something? The same trends can continue. People can get killed, all those type of things. The worst things that can happen if we do something are pretty much the same as the worst things that can happen if we don't do something. It's the same answer. So if you do something, the worst that can happen is this. If you don't do something, the worst that can happen, it's the same thing. Okay? And thank goodness a lot of those worst things haven't happened yet. So then we said, well, maybe we're asking the wrong question. And Mike facilitated it, and the question he asked then, well, what is the best thing that we can do with this, and how do you feel about it if we did it? And there was a collective answer there. We can hold people accountable, we can provide services, we can have mental health services. We just got, I don't know if you know this or not, but we got like millions of dollars of mental health and drug addiction grants here in the last 2 months from four different agencies from the state. But anyway, there was a series of steps there of what we can do to make things better, and how do we feel about it. And it wasn't based upon our fear, it was based upon the hope of what is yet to come that we together as a community can do, because we know we all care. So, observation, what we do with this contract, there's a part of me that says it's irrelevant, because you have to have economic viability, you have to have it legal, and you have to have social acceptability. If you don't have social acceptability, I mean, we've been looking at this for now 2 years, and we've had property that fit those buffers and those kind of things, and for whatever reason, it wasn't deemed socially acceptable, and it wasn't the city council that determined that, it was the people that bought the property up after the offer was made or the interest was indicated. So I think we got work to do as a community. Whether this becomes relevant or not is yet to be determined. What we do tonight, I'm not sure is that important. We do need to discuss it. We're going to meet next Wednesday as a group. It doesn't involve city council. We got at least 80 nonprofits in the community that work with the homeless. 80 nonprofits, and a lot of times they don't work together. That doesn't mean that they're bad people, but they tend to work independently, and they're concerned about their own funding stream and things like that. So can an urban campground help? It's going to help some people. Is it going to get the people out of the park and out of your front door? No. Is it going to reduce drug addiction in the city? No. Is it going to reduce the crime rate? No. The only thing that it's going to do for those 40 people, I think they have a 40% success rate down in Rogue Retreat, so there would be 16 people on a rotation coming through that want to make a change in their life and would have the opportunity to do so. So anyway, that's what I know, and I felt the need to speak up on behalf of those people that attended that workshop.
DJ's on the phone, then Val.
So I have to clarify a misconception that I've been hearing going around the community, discussion forums, publications, etc. So this directive for an urban campground or any other likened service that we put in this community will have zero implication on enforcement of homeless in our parks. That enforcement is demonstrated by an injunction, and the only thing that's going to change that injunction is a finding of the courts. So anybody please paying attention, we all need to understand that the enforcement of the parks, the presence of homeless in the parks, and whether or not we decide to build social services in our community likened to an urban campground are mutually exclusive. Everybody needs to understand that. That being said, I think this is a good thing, but I do feel that it needs to be done right. There are 3 items that are still contentious for me as an individual counselor. One of them is the buffers. One of them are the buffers, I should say. I think that in establishing the buffers, we didn't have an opportunity to really look at the implications of the buffers. It seemed a little roughshod. Now we're talking about a residential buffer. I think it's appropriate that we get that GIS map, that information, and really look at the implications of those buffers based on what AllCare wants to do. I do believe that there needs to be a buffer around the residential area. I had thought about a 1 tax lot buffer or a 50-foot buffer, whatever is larger to go around the residential areas. But if you think about that residential buffer, alongside with all the other buffers that we've talked about, I would have to agree that it now becomes prohibitive in selecting properties. So I think that truly needs an overhaul. The second thing is, and it was my suggestion that came up in the presentation, was to look at this contribution more so as a 0% interest loan that would be manifest itself as a note and trust deed on whatever property that was purchased. The city would have to subordinate on any financing or expect reimbursement with the sale of that property. I think that would be the wisest thing to do, given that these are taxpayers' money. And the third thing is the termination for convenience. I understand that we decided that 3 years in is the time the termination for convenience would activate. And I just think that comes from a gross misunderstanding of what that termination clause actually says. And I think if that understanding could come to light, I would be certain that people would agree that that termination for convenience, there's a reason why that is in all contracts, especially government contracts. So that being said, at the very least, the buffer zones need to be worked over. I don't think that we're ready to make a decision on this. Whereas I do think it was appropriate to bring this to the business meeting tonight so we could hear public comment. So given all those things said, I'd like to make a motion to defer this until, at the very least, that the staff is equipped to present to us GIS maps in a meeting so we can reestablish the buffer zone.
Is there a second, Kurt? All right, so the motion has been made to defer a decision tonight until after we've had an opportunity to review the buffer zones. Discussion on that? Brian?
So last time we talked about this, we were made to understand that we would have that information tonight, and we were not informed at any point that we would not have that information tonight, and we were allowed to proceed with this meeting without having apparently information that counselors need to make this decision. So I'm just voicing my frustration to staff at putting us in this position.
Further discussion? Rick?
As a land use consultant, I just see preparing that map as an absolute nightmare. I'd rather look at individual properties and look at them as to their possible potential validity if there are problems with it, rather than just do a broad stroke on the computer saying what the impacts are, because I think the GIS is going to be a real challenge. Thank you.
Further discussion on that motion?
I do have a discussion topic for the motion.
Go ahead, DJ.
Yeah, Rick, I'd just like to respond to you. I do agree with you is that it would be rather labor intensive to try to do that. But my understanding of this goal here is to establish a boundary or establish little regulations that the council sees fit, and then sign it and let it go. I really don't have an interest in evaluating the properties that are to be chosen. I am much more fond of creating the guidelines and releasing interest for them to pursue an urban campground.
Rick?
DJ, in response to your comment, I guess I would like to think each individual property has its own characteristics and may have some merit, and by the guidelines it may not be eligible, and maybe it should be eligible. So that was part of my questions before. How set in stone are these requirements? Do we have the opportunity for a variance or to reconsider? And I guess I would want to leave that door open if AllCare were to find a piece of property that was appropriate, if there were problems, that they could come to us and maybe we could work something out. Thank you.
Val?
Well, I have to admit, in this case, I feel with Brian that it's just like, how many times can we kick this thing down the road? To me, I feel like that's part of why we've gone through all these sessions we've gone through. And I agree, you know, it's nice to have a GIS map, but every time we pull one of those up, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and it doesn't matter where we put it, there will be NIMBYism. I mean, that is a given fact. So I personally would just as soon move forward. The only thing I have a problem with is I think really the real property, 300 feet, I like what DJ had brought up of having there be some sort of 100-foot or a lot side buffer. It is going to be it's not a drop-by campground for everybody to stop by on their way, whatever. It is fenced, it is all of those things. And so I've been down this road. I was there in the very beginning with Nancy and Geneva, and I'm getting burned out myself too. And I think it's going to continue to be a NIMBY problem, and it is just one piece of a huge puzzle. You know, we've been dealing with this since 2013 is when this lawsuit started. I mean, it's 2013, and so I think that we need to set the parameters and let it go and volunteer as a council to go out and help them establish in whatever neighborhood they choose to have it move forward.
Did you have something, Aaron?
I just want to mention to Councilor De La Grange that in a agenda setting meeting with the mayor and council president, I did notify the mayor and council president that we were going to have difficulty not be able to provide the buffer, and we went over a couple of map designation areas that showed that any buffer on residential would drastically reduce or make it very difficult to find an urban campground, but that we would not have the ability to have a map for this meeting.
I do now recall that conversation. Thanks, Aaron. Did you have something, Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the clarification, and given what you just said and what DJ and Valerie said with regards to that particular buffer, I believe DJ said one tax lot or 50 feet. 50 feet sounds, from what I'm understanding, like about as far as we could go without it creating a real problem for finding a site. So I'd be comfortable making that buffer 50 feet or less and just putting that piece to bed right now, and then save staff a lot of time and a lot of effort to show us kind of what we already know based on what Aaron just said. And I'm personally ready to work through the other two issues that DJ talked about tonight and put this to bed and move on to some other topics. Thank you.
DJ?
Yeah, let me just clarify the thought process behind one tax lot or 50 feet. You know, if you could imagine a tax lot that was 55 feet wide, you know, from a residential zone, obviously it would be that one tax lot. But if you had a 30-foot wide tax lot adjacent to residential zones, it would just be that one tax lot and not 50 feet into the next one. So you wouldn't have two tax lots between the residential. Maybe that's not the best recommendation for the goal here, but it was trying to be comprehensive in just to make sure that it's just one lot in between residential zones, between business park, industrial, or commercial otherwise. And then another clarification for the motion is I'm happy we're talking about the willingness of council to whether move on or not. And that's why I made the motion. Are we ready to move forward and talk about these things? Personally, I am. But let's vote on it so we know where we stand.
Thank you. Yes, the motion was actually to defer until we have an opportunity to review buffer zones. So are you asking us to vote on that motion, DJ?
Yes, it's still on the table.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on that? Okay, so the motion was to defer until we have an opportunity to review the buffer zones. And DJ, you made the motion, so how do you vote?
Yes.
Start with Joel here.
Yes.
Rob?
No.
Val?
No.
Rick?
No.
Hang on, I lost track here. Rick, okay. Kurt?
Yes.
And Brian?
No.
And Vanessa?
No.
Okay, motion failed 5-3. Further discussion. Go ahead, Brian.
So since we're talking about that buffer, I figure we should just finish that piece of it. Yeah, I don't know what the best way to go is, whether it's one tax lot or 50 feet. 50 feet sounds more concrete to me, just having, all the other buffers are a specific amount of feet. And if it's 50 feet, it would automatically not be directly adjacent to residential. Whereas, there could be a tax lot that's, really, really wide, hundreds of feet potentially. So having it be like a set amount of feet for the residential, I think would be preferred.
Yeah, Aaron.
So just to make a comment on that for council, thinking about the way tax lots are, et cetera, you could do a one tax lot or 50 feet, the lesser or greater of the two if you wanted to. However, tax lots aren't always uniform in nature. There's many tax lots that are flag lots where they just have the minimum of a driveway. And that would classify if it was under the tax lot, where it might not reach the spirit of where council's wanting to go. So the clearer direction may be to have a footage associated with it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would propose that to be 50 feet.
So you are proposing just a flat 50 feet. Okay, further discussion? Okay, there's other topics here. There's no motions. What all do you want to talk about? Val?
I do think it's important that in paragraph 9, we do include case management, because as is brought forth, I think that's a really important part of what this is to provide social services. So that was a placeholder, but I do think it's very important that that be placed in paragraph 9. And I agree with, I personally think that no termination, I do believe in there being a termination for convenience, because we talked about this at our last workshop. It's in every governmental agreement. It's just kind of a given in most contracts. And I think in an emergency situation, if something had to be done, we've seen some pretty crazy things happen in the last few years. I would like to be able to terminate it if it needed to happen. And we've already talked about the fact that the foundation is covered for costs in some means anyway, that it couldn't be just done for the sake of, we're out of here. So I think that just the original termination for convenience is, should remain.
DJ?
Yeah, let's see. I agree with the 50-foot buffer, given the information. I think that's going to really just get at the spirit of one tax lot, et cetera, from residential. And then moving on to that other topic, thank you, Valerie, for bringing that up. As I mentioned before, just commenting on the termination for convenience, I agree. It should be in the contract from the beginning because of what it is. So that's really all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Brian?
So regarding the termination, the no-cause termination for convenience, I understand why legal counsel thinks it's a good idea to have that in there. Legal counsel's perspective of what is in the best interest of the city may not always align with what council's definition of what's in the best interest of the city is, but I do understand his perspective. We also have termination by mutual consent in here, so both parties can agree to terminate the agreement. We have termination and default for cause, so if we have a good reason to terminate, we have that in here. We also have default by material breach and a whole list of items that would make the contract go into default. So we have a myriad of ways that, if something goes wrong with this contract, to get out of it. Having a no-cause termination for convenience, it doesn't give ACCF the security that they should have trying to move forward with this venture, especially if it goes into effect immediately. That would mean that we could, this council or future council could essentially just change their mind and decide they don't want to support the campground and pull the rug out, and then all of the work that we've been doing the past couple of years and all the work that AllCare Foundation's been doing is for nothing. So in my opinion, the no-cause termination for convenience is a higher risk for the best interest of the city to have in there than to not have in there. And if council really feels like it needs to be in there, a 4-year or a 5-year time period before it goes into effect, so that Rug Retreat has an opportunity to establish and to do some good and to show the community what's possible with this venture, I think would be really helpful. So they have a little bit of security, to accomplish what we're trying to do here. So if council thinks we need to keep it in there, I would propose that it's at least a 4-year or 5-year period so they can get established and, show the community what they can do before the rug's pulled out from under them.
Rob? Rob?
Misunderstood.
Usually I'm the one who forgets your name, but.
I agree that the termination for convenience, I guess, I can understand the city attorney's position or why he would give us that advice. It actually concerns me that if we were to move forward with no time frame on that, I'm not even sure that AllCare would agree to sign the agreement, and then we can start all over again, which would really be unfortunate. But to me, once they find a piece of property, for all I know, it could be 6 months or a year before it's really up and running. And I'd like to give it a couple of years to demonstrate to the public and basically demonstrate to the public, all members of the public, that it's a valuable asset to Grants Pass. And I think there's so many different ways for cause and for reasonable cause for the city to end that agreement, but for essentially no cause whatsoever except for something that is completely unforeseen at this point, I can't get behind a zero-year termination for convenience. 4 years makes a lot of sense to me. Last meeting, I think I said 6 years. I would be willing to do or vote yes on 4 years for that. And I really don't think it's putting the city at risk, and the possibility of, I don't think it's putting the city at risk, because if AllCare or this whole thing just doesn't work out, if it implodes for lots of different reasons, there's lots of valid ways to terminate this agreement. So this is just kind of open-ended concern or fear. And I'm not the type of person that has an open-ended fear of this thing, because there's many ways for us to legitimately and justifiably end the contract.
Kurt, then Joel?
When we discussed this topic before, I had just relayed my experience because I'd done a lot of government contracts. The termination for convenience was always in there, and that it always concerned me, but I'd never gotten burned by it.
But my boss at that same company said to me once, he said, "Kurt, do you think in possibilities or probabilities?" And as I think about the termination for convenience, I think of both of those things. And Augustus did his job as our attorney and is trying to protect our interests and limit our risk. But I'm willing to accept the risk of eliminating the termination for convenience. Thank you.
Joel, then Brian.
So Augustus, you may correct me if I'm wrong. When you have a provision like that in a contract for no termination for convenience within 3 years or termination for convenience, that does not excuse dealing in bad faith and doesn't excuse the city from liability. So if city council changed and terminated it for convenience and AllCare had a contract with the city, it wouldn't be AllCare that was hurt. If we did it inappropriately, it would be the city because we would be liable. That's my understanding.
So a termination for convenience is really meant to reserve government prerogative for changing economic conditions or anything that is unforeseeable down the line that may require that the government unilaterally cancel a contract. Now, the termination itself, that's you want to talk about the distinction between a breach and a termination. A termination ends the contract. And the way that this contract has been structured is that there are respective rights of each party upon termination. So the rights of AllCare upon termination, whether that would be for convenience, by mutual consent, for default and breach under certain circumstances, AllCare, the contract has been designed to make both parties whole. So that means that whatever money is put into the contract in terms of capital improvements by AllCare, those would be paid back. The costs for them having to terminate subcontracts with Rogue Retreat or other entities would have to be paid back by the city. I think I had stated that a termination for convenience is anything but convenient. It is a break in case of emergency clause. It is not something that an entity, whether it's a government or a business, is going to freewheelingly execute just to get out of what they might view as a bad deal. And a court would certainly agree with you, Councillor King, in saying that if there's a determination that the parties entered into the contract with bad faith, not acting in good faith, then the use of that provision is not lawful.
So then that would also be if the city's actions was found to be arbitrary and capricious and not for just cause, AllCare would have reason if the city didn't reimburse them to sue the city and including damages.
That's not entirely accurate. That's not entirely accurate just because the termination itself is already provided for in the contract. So a termination versus a breach, again, the termination ends the contract and then it talks about what the respective parties get upon termination, and then the parties don't have a legal obligation to each other. So it isn't a freewheeling liability trap. It's an organized way to terminate a contract before its natural termination.
Brian.
Thank you. So with regards to terminating or entering into the contract in bad faith and that whole line of thought, a few years from now, there's going to be different people up here. So those people won't even have been, we could enter into it in good faith, and then whoever's sitting up here in 3 or 4 or 5 years could, they weren't party to that decision. So they could, not be beholden to that.
So the signees of the party.
Go ahead, Joel.
Well, the signees of the party are the legal parties, so it's the city of Grants Pass. It's not the individual councilors, it's the city of Grants Pass.
Okay, great. So we agreed on the 50 feet. I personally think it's a bigger risk to have the termination for convenience in there for the success of the campground, for the greater good of the city of Grants Pass. So just to get going, I will make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant between the city and AllCare Community Foundation for the development of an urban campground in Grants Pass, with the amendments of revising the placeholder on 6.2 from 300 feet to 50 feet as discussed, and modifying 12.1 from a 3-year period to a 4-year period.
Mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, Augustus?
Counselor, you had also indicated at one point that you wanted a change to the restrictive covenant to change the parenthetical AllCare to either ACCF or grantee. Would you like that change to be made also?
Thank you, yes. I think referring to them as the grantee in throughout the covenant would be more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to include any case management in your motion?
Yes, and that is in the draft contract, so so I just assumed that that would be in there. That verbiage is in there as I see it.
Okay, that's in item 9. Yes, it is. Okay, second from Kurt. Discussion on that motion. Val?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to vote for it, and the reason is I still feel that termination. What I see, Brian, is I see that it's your fear of it not being successful that is what's pushing you to get rid of that termination convenience, because I think that is in most governmental contracts. I think you're making much more of a deal than it needs to be. And I think that it's your fear of the future of them being successful. And I personally am not afraid of that. So I really would like to keep the termination for convenience in there, because I just think that's something we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if that needs to be shut down for whatever emergency needs to happen. I do not in any way think it's something that anybody would do just simply for the sake of doing it. So for that reason, I'll be voting no.
Rick?
Mayor?
Go ahead, Vanessa, and then we'll have Rick.
Sorry about that. I think it is worth noting on our agenda later this evening, we are slated to enter an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation, as well as authorizing the city manager to accept funds, actually a state grant from the Oregon State Fire Marshal, both agreements of which do not hold a termination clause of this nature. It's just that if the actions are illegal under federal or state law, then at that point it becomes inactive. So it is inaccurate to say that this is common in other governmental agreements, because based on the documents in our agenda later on this evening, that is not true. So I do support moving forward with altering the termination clause. Thank you.
Thank you. We had Rick, then Joel, then Brian.
I also tonight will not be supportive of the motion on board, because I feel 50 feet is inadequate from a residential zone. And I feel to have acceptance by the public, the better the buffers will have acceptance in the community. But again, as I've expressed earlier, I think there has to be an opportunity to vary those if necessary. Thank you.
Joel?
It's been my experience that provision for termination without cause is mainly between a government entity and a private party. And I've never exercised it, and I've had it in probably, I don't know, probably 500 contracts. No, probably more than that. And I never exercised it. So we spent a lot of time with the probability of this never being exercised. And I'm not sure why, but I think it needs to be in there in case something like that does happen, and then with a small probability that it would happen, and it probably won't. And so because of that, I'll be voting no.
Brian?
So I just wanted to point out one other difference with regards to this. This is a grant agreement. We are giving a grant, so traditionally when you give a grant, you give the grant, the grantee fulfills the obligations, and everyone goes on their merry way. So we're not treating this as we have treated other grants in the past. We just had one, a couple weeks ago where this exact topic came up with an affordable housing project where, the argument was made that, if we start changing how we do grants for this one, then we're gonna have to start changing it for others, and this is the exact same thing. So, it's a grant agreement. It's, traditionally you give the grant, the grantee fulfills it, and the parties are complete. So, I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? All right, so the motion was to, get back here to my language, to approve the resolution to authorize the city manager to exercise the grant agreement and restrictive covenant with 3 amendments. So one would be to change the residential zone buffer to 50 feet. One is to change the duration of the termination for convenience clause from 3 years to 4 years, and then change the abbreviated version of the AllCare Foundation and the restricted covenant to grantee instead of AllCare. And without further discussion, Brian, you made that motion, I believe, so how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
No, for the reasons specified.
Rob?
Yes.
Val?
No, for the reasons specified.
Rick?
No, for reasons specified.
Kurt?
After 17 months, I'm happy to say yes.
DJ?
No.
And Vanessa?
Yes.
We have a 4-4 tie. And I do support the suggested amendments, so I will vote yes. And the motion passes 5-4. Is there any further discussion on this topic? All right. We will hop back to item A on the agenda, which was to consider an ordinance amending the municipal code regarding false alarms. Sorry, Jim, you lost your audience.
I was going to say, was it something I said? I think I showered. I used deodorant. Everybody bails. Apparently,
We
this is
support the
not going to be a
police.
hot topic, so I'll apologize in advance for the boring one to go forward. So, thank you, Mayor, Council. We're here to do a quick housekeeping on our false alarm ordinance to give you an update on some changes that we're going to have to make as a result of some internal changes within the agency. So subject and summary is last year you did approve the false alarm ordinance that we've been using for the police and the fire side of the house as we respond to a significant number of false alarms throughout the years, and this is an attempt to try to correct that so we're not responding to so many. Because of the changes in the organization, we're no longer public safety. We do need to make some updates to the ordinance so that way we are consistent with the current structure. So relationship to council goals is it provides cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community, as well as enhancing community safety by increasing proficiencies. So again, last year we came to you with this false alarm ordinance. It was approved. It's helped us to reduce some of our false alarms that we've been seeing so far. We've had some pretty good cooperation on these as we've started using this program. And obviously, we don't want to waste the emergency services and our resources that we do have available. So the majority of the false alarms that we do handle are handled by our police officers. On the law enforcement side of the house, we get far more alarms for burglar or break-in related alarms versus the fire side. But they're all across the board, so we do get hit on both sides of that. So the background piece, as I said, is really to make some changes to this ordinance with the split between the two. So the ordinance amendment is going to make a couple of different changes. One is you'll notice that the 5.67 is removed. The majority of that ordinance is gone. There's only one section of that that's left now, and it's moved to the 5.73, which covers the false alarm and the majority of the alarm ordinance that was implemented. So these changes are really just a change from what is no longer in effect to the new one there. The verbiage is all staying. The only thing that's changed is what's highlighted that you have in front of you. The biggest part of this is to change the right to appeal. The right to appeal showed that the appeal had to go through the public safety director. Since we no longer have a public safety director, it's going to have to go to either the police chief or the fire chief or the designee, which was added in recently because of those appeals that have come through. And I was supposed to make a note to Councilor Riker that you did say something about this previously, and so we are finally coming around to what you recommended there. Section C on this, again, is just a verbiage change going away from public safety director, and you'll see the change just includes the police chief, fire chief, or a designee. And then the call to action would be today. Options and alternatives are to adopt the proposed ordinance or modify it, and also, as always, council discretion. Staff's recommendation is that the council approve the ordinance amending Grants Pass Muni Code 5.73 false alarms, specifically sections 5.73040 and 5.73060. And with that, that's all I have for now, unless you have questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Val?
I just have a question, and that was, I think you alluded to it, that when we first got this, put this in place, it was, we're hopeful that people would get alarms, faulty alarms fixed. Have you been seeing that they have indeed been doing that?
Yeah, we're actually seeing pretty good results from this. We've sent several letters out. We've had a lot of calls from folks about that. When they get the warnings, we're not seeing that repetitive nature. We've had a couple of businesses that we've had to work with because there's been some concerns about their alarm, whether it was up to date or what the issues were with it. Fortunately, they've worked with us to try to get it done, and we've been trying to work with them the best we can to help them also with options and making sure that they understand that if the alarm's not operating properly, to lean on the alarm companies because it's their responsibility to make sure that all the equipment works appropriately. So we're trying to not go after the business themselves. We're really trying to push them to saying, go to your alarm company, unless it's one that you purchase yourself, and then obviously you own that. But otherwise, get to your alarm companies and have your alarm company come out and make sure sensors are good, that everything is checked and it's updated.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Joel? No?
No,
All right. Was there anybody from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? No? Okay. We will turn it over to council for discussion, and Joel, go ahead.
I don't want to cut discussion short, but I move to adopt the ordinance amending Grants Pass Municipal Code Chapter 5.73, specifically 5.73040, imposition of fees and payment, and 5.73060, right to appeal, and have it read by title only, first reading.
Thank you. We've got dogfight for second over there. We'll go with Valerie. She's sitting closer to me. Make you arm wrestle next time. Is there any discussion on this motion? All right, so Joel, you made the motion to adopt, and how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ?
Yeah.
And Vanessa had to go to work. Motion passes 7-0. Julie, can you please read the title?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass amending Grants Pass Municipal Code Chapter 5.73 false alarms, specifically 5.73.040 imposition of fees and payment, and 5.73.060 right to appeal.
Brian?
I move to adopt the ordinance amending Grants Pass Municipal Code Chapter 5.73, specifically 5.73.040, imposition of fees and payment, and 5.73060, right to appeal, and have it read by title only, second reading.
Thank you. Rick with the second. Any discussion? Brian, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob? Valerie?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
DJ?
Yeah.
Motion passes 7-0. Julie?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass, amending Grants Pass Municipal Code, Chapter 5.73, false alarms, specifically 5.73.040, imposition of fees and payment, and 5.73.060, right to appeal.
Thank you. And item B now is to consider resolution authorizing the city manager to enter an intergovernmental agreement with ODOT. And looks like we have Eric coming up. Sorry, Wade.
Oh.
We have Wade coming up.
That's all right. You guys probably don't know me that well, but I'm really wishing I'd have brought a snack today. It's been a little longer than I thought.
He mentioned that because whenever there's snacks, he's definitely there
Yeah.
often.
I'm notorious. Maybe.
I always know where to go if I'm in the building and I'm hungry, because he's always got something stashed away.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, I'm here to talk about the right-of-way services agreement with the Allen Creek Road Improvements Project. My name is Wade Elliott. We might have to go manual here. There we go. It's working now. So today we have a resolution asking you guys to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with ODOT for the right-of-way services under the Allen Creek Road Improvement Project. So I think we're in year 11 of the Allen Creek Road Improvements Project, so we're getting there. I think we've seen a little bit of traction here lately, and we're going to keep the ball rolling. So the next thing is that we need to pass this resolution. So this project is to upgrade a rural kind of county-style 2-lane road that's very narrow, no shoulders, no bike lanes, no sidewalks, and to bring it up to city arterial standards from West Harbeck to Denton Trail. This project has a large number of different funding sources in it that range from federal to state to, we even got Josephine County to kick some money in on this one, as well as our local match. And we have recently, or at least my mind tells me is recently, we executed a local agency agreement on October 21st with ODOT that detailed the roles and responsibilities of what the city and ODOT was going to do to design and bring this project to delivery. So this one is for the right-of-way services. This does have federal funding, as I alluded to earlier, and so with that, only a certified local agency can actually design and administer the project. We are not. I don't believe that there is one in the state outside of maybe Portland. So it's very hard to do, which our de facto delivery agency is then ODOT. And these federal requirements also pertain to the property acquisition under the Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisitions Policy Act of 1970, commonly referred to as the Uniform Act, which has a few stipulations we'll get to here in a minute. So within this, ODOT, and through their contractor and subcontractor for right-of-way services, will do the following things. Try to paraphrase the agreement so you guys didn't have to read it too detailed. They will make initial contact with the property owners. They will conduct existing condition surveys for environmental hazards. Most of that work's already been done. We got right of entries from most of these properties, and we're looking for things like monitor well fuel sources, septic tanks, leach fields, anything that might have been buried there. Tested the soils for pesticides, herbicides, petroleum, you name it, and we did it all. We've also done a lot of other wetland monitoring as well as background noise studies to see if there was going to be too much noise with the new road. I mean, there is a lot of stuff, which is why we don't do this. ODOT does. And then they will also order and procure preliminary title reports and determine extents of the property, how much property we would need from each of these, and then prepare legal descriptions for the property and or the easements, and then determine valuations and perform appraisal reviews to determine what the just compensation value is. So then on the city side of things, the city will be responsible for performing the negotiations with the property owners. The city will acquire all the titles under the city's name. The city has the sole authority over the negotiations and the settlement offers, as long as they don't exceed what ODOT has already determined is the just compensation level. If we do that, then we need to produce a document that says why we did that. And then here's the key part. We need to pass a resolution of intention and determination of necessity in accordance with ORS 35.235 and ORS 35.610 to authorize acquisitions and ultimately condemnation if needed. The resolution of intention and determination of necessity is needed before we can start doing actual negotiations with the property owners. So spoiler alert, this will be coming to you guys very soon. That's the real key part. So what this agreement is going to do is it's going to allow our contractor, ODOT, and their contractors to start looking into these properties, start building appraisals, determining just compensation, determining what the limits are that we'll need, whether it's right-of-way, temporary, or permanent easements. That's what this does. But we will need to pass that resolution because we can't acquire property with the federal money until we have that ordinance in place, or the resolution. And it is, I believe, Exhibit C in the packet that you have of ODOT's agreement, if you want to take a look at what a sample of that looks like. City's responsibilities continued. I think we got the longer list here. If condemnation is necessary, we need to offer mediation and perform all administrative functions required for the process, and then file all recommendations for condemnation at least 70 days prior to the right-of-way certification date. And then, of course, close all property transactions, which would include filing with the county and things like that. So right now, there's approximately 40 foot of right-of-way out there existing. Our footprint is 66 feet. So if you took half of that from each side, roughly we need 13 feet along the entire length of the roadway. There's 41 properties along there. There's a little bit of a chicane in the middle, so it's not exactly 13 feet from every property, but as a general ballpark, that's what it's going to be, and that's what we're still determining as we design the project. There's going to be some permanent slope easements. In some places, there's drainage ditches. The elevations don't match up with what the road's going to be. There's going to need to be retaining walls, and those will require permanent slope easements in place, and then temporary construction easements, which will be needed to go onto people's property to tie in things like their driveway to the new road grades as well as the approaches. Some relocations, full relocations may be required for the project, but we really don't know yet. We are not quite to what ODOT calls design acceptance package, the DAP plans, which roughly equates to 30%. So I've seen a draft DAP plan, so I'd say we're maybe about 20% right now. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. I know the colors probably don't stand out to you, so I'm going to start descending down the arrows. Top arrow is the existing right-of-way in front of this property. The second arrow would be the proposed right-of-way where it's moving along out on this property. Third arrow is that nice dotted fuchsia line. That's an example of where the permanent easement would be. In this case, it's a city utility easement, CUE, very common with all development. So in this location, we would have the fiber, we would have gas, all utilities that we don't want in the roadway. And then finally, you'll see a little orange line down there, and that's an example of a temporary easement, which is where we're tying this particular property's driveway back into their driveway. And then finally, here's a project schedule, just to let you know kind of where we're at in the whole process. You guys can dig into it if you want later or ask me any questions. But in general, we're looking to put the project out to bid in the late summer, early fall of 2023. and then construction would commence right after that. Some work could be done in the winter, but very likely it's going to push until the spring, early summer of 2024 to get this completed. All right, so the call to action date would be today, and it can be deferred, of course, at your direction. Delays could extend the project delivery schedule. A lot of this work takes a lot of time, so if we delay this, it potentially could delay the project. Cost implications, there is already $1.5 million allocated to the right-of-way phase of this project. It's not additional money, it's already money that's pieces of the federal, state, Josephine County, our local match that's in there. And this agreement will unlock that $1.5 million so we can start spending it to acquire the right-of-way. So your options tonight, direct city manager to enter an intergovernmental agreement with ODOT for right-of-way services for the Allen Creek Road Improvements Project number TR 6116. And that's it for me, but I'd love to have any questions you guys have.
Thank you. Questions? Rob?
Yeah, two questions. On page 23 of the packet, I think it's 11 of this presentation, in paragraph C, up near the top. Uh, 23 of the packet, 11 of this presentation. Are you there yet, Wade, or no?
I am in the packet. I'm trying to find the slide numbers here.
What?
This one?
It's, I don't know, page 23 in the packet.
It's on page 11.
Well, 11
Oh,
of
I
this
get you.
presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yep, I'm there.
So paragraph C. Okay, so my question is, it says agencies shall attempt to have the property owner undertake any necessary remediation at the property owner's expense. So I'm reading that to say that you got a property owner, he or she is perfectly fine with their property, it's functioning the way they want, and then the agency goes to take it over and the agency says, hey, for our purposes, it's not clean enough and you're gonna have to pay for it. Is that accurate?
I believe that it is, and then further, I think in the actual agreement, it does say that, I think that would go into the negotiations part of it, but in the actual agreement, it says that the city would take over the properties as is. So I think this would be something that we would negotiate if there was something hazardous there, but in general, we take it as is.
So, thank you. So the other question I have is, the property owners that are affected here, are they city voters?
They're within the UGB, part of them are, and part of them are in the city limits, so I don't know in the UGB actually, if they're city voters or not.
As I remember it 2 years ago when this came before council, it was pretty clear that most of them were not city voters, and yet somehow the city council was going to essentially force them to potentially give up their property. So I just want to make sure now, are these city voters or are they not city voters? In other words, do we actually represent these people? Could they vote us out of office, or if they didn't like this decision?
Yeah,
Are they city voters or not?
half of the properties on the, and I'm going to get the east or the west are all in the city limits. The other half of the properties are not in the city limits, they're in the urban growth boundary.
Okay, so they didn't vote to put us here, and they can't vote to take us out? The half of them?
Half of them cannot, correct.
Can I vote half yes and half no on this, or no? Thank you.
Are there other questions? Rick?
Thank you, Wade. So I'm in support of proceeding forward, and I realize this is all necessary, but just one side question. The final engineering design does not come forward until all the right-of-way has been acquired? Is that a problem?
Yeah, and that's that 70-day, we have to file everything 70 days before that right-of-way date, and that's what that's for. ODOT won't finalize plans until they know that they actually have all the properties in hand, or we do, and all the easements.
So we're not incurring expense for an engineering design that we have confirmation that we have the right-of-way?
Well, they'll keep moving forward through the 90% plans, but they won't finalize it. So if for some reason we drug this out and ultimately decide not to, then yeah, we would incur all of those design expenses up to 90%.
And do we, as the council, have an opportunity to see, I would say, the final draft design?
Yeah, and I think we sent it out in a council memo not too long ago, but if you want.
It was about 2 months ago, we sent a council memo out with the final designs, providing you
I'll look it up.
that
Thank you.
information.
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. In the packet on page 14, paragraph 6A, it references under no condition shall state obligations under this agreement exceed $1.5 million. And I just want to be clear what that limit is. Is that a limit for the evaluation? It's not the limit for how much they're willing to spend to procure those properties. Is that accurate?
It's all of it. That's your consultant fees as well as acquiring the properties.
Okay, so I guess ODOT or city staff is fully confident that the amount is going to be less than that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say fully confident. If it came to that, we could do an amendment and shuffle some of the money out of the, it's not a hard and fast. We could shuffle it out of the construction side of things and move it into the right-of-way phase, but it would take some work, like a STIP amendment to do that.
Would it be easier to just make it 2 million now so we don't have to do that?
It's already in the STIP and it's been there for about 11 years.
All right, so we'll probably have to change it later. Thank you.
Aaron?
I just wanted to respond to Councilor Pell's question with regards to property owners and down Allen Creek. It appears that the majority of the property owners are not within the city limits.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, I forget which slide it was, but there was a slide about recourse for the property owners, like going to mediation to negotiate. Yeah, so if condemnation is necessary, offer mediation and perform all administrative functions required. How does that play out if mediation doesn't work? Does the property owner have recourse to take it to court, or how would that proceed?
I'm going to punt this one to Augustus if I can.
Yeah, so typically in a condemnation action, negotiation is always the first step. And so in condemnation, the only issue, if it were to go to court, the only issue is the just compensation. Because the resolution of necessity before the whole process starts outlines why the city needs the property. So if, yes, the worst case is that you go to court and then you're fighting about what just compensation is.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think Vanessa has sent me a question that she'd like to have answered. She's not in a position where she can ask it herself right now, but on page 31, section 4, the question is regarding the total total cost responsibility not adding up correctly. So what she has indicated is that the total cost is approximately $10.9 million, which includes $6.8 million in federal funds, $97,000 in state funds, $2.8 million in local allocated funds, and a remaining balance of $1.2 million. Under section 9, this says it requires all funds are available, yet there is a $1 million balance not accounted for. That's as much as I know to try to clarify the question, but
I'll have to get back to you on that. I'll do some research.
okay, thank you. Any further questions? Joel?
So am I correct in my assumption that this type of improvement to the transportation infrastructure is necessary for development of multi-unit or any type of housing along Allen Creek Road?
Yeah, I would say that it is necessary for our transportation system as a whole, the interconnectivity of it all. Allen Creek Road has the potential to be a very important arterial through our city. Our transportation system plan shows it as a major north-south connector, and right now the preferred location for the fourth bridge that would tie into Lincoln Road. So I would say that getting this to be a through street and to function as an arterial is very important. It is going to help development in the area a lot because all these federal funds took care of the frontage for these properties when and if they get rezoned and developed. So it will help a lot out there.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Wade, there's a snack for you over by Julie. Is there anybody from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? All right, turn it back to you, council, for discussion. Val, then Brian.
Yeah, I'd like to move to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an intergovernmental agreement number 73000-0004633 for the right-of-way services with ODOT for the Allen Creek Road improvements, project number TR6116.
Thank you, Brian, with the second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Rob.
Yeah, I realize that this project is many years in the making or the planning, and everyone is really anxious to fire up the bulldozers and build. I just don't feel that the council is the appropriate governing body here, since we don't represent more than half of the property owners involved. I realize that that doesn't seem to bother anyone else on the podium, but I have to vote no because of that.
Any other discussion? Okay. Valerie, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
No.
DJ?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 6-1. All right, then we are skipping item D on the agenda tonight. The city manager had requested deferring that. Item E, motion extending concessions in the park pilot project. Oh, good, Brad, you've been quiet today.
Very nice.
All right, we have a fairly quick one for you, I think. This is regarding concessions in Riverside Park and a pilot project that was done a few years ago. So the subject in summary, it's a motion that would extend what is now an expired 2019 concessions in the park pilot project. The majority of this council not being a part of that, we have a little bit of background here to bring you up to speed. Relationship to council goals supports encouraging economic opportunities by offering additional opportunities for food truck cart businesses to operate in the parks. Just to remind you, May 16th is when Councilor Fazer requested that this 2019 food truck pilot program be placed on a future workshop agenda. There was a May 25th meeting with Mayor, Council President, and City Manager to talk about that, and it was moved to tonight. The July 1st, 2019 meeting is where they kind of discussed the pros and cons of having a pilot project, which essentially was putting allowing 2 to 3 food trucks in Riverside Park during the summer season to come in and operate. Currently, under the municipal code, the food trucks can't operate at all in the parks, period. It's a commercial activity, and they can't be there unless they're attached to a special event. So I think the reason this was kind of called a pilot project is that there really wouldn't necessarily be a special event. They would just basically be there supporting, for example, the spray park and offering some kind of, handy service that is right there and easy to get to. Some of the discussion that took place at that July 1st meeting was to approve it for just one season at that point, with 2 or 3 food trucks. And that would include, there was quite a bit of discussion about the garbage regulations and making sure that that was adequately addressed. And then there was also kind of an encouragement to have a larger special event, food truck event, which didn't really go anywhere. There was some discussion about it. The council did receive a presentation from John Bowen a little bit after this about some ideas about doing like a food truck court or a bigger event, but that didn't occur. There was also no new fee that was instituted for the pilot project. It's just basically the standard fees apply. You do have to get a business tax license to operate a food truck in the city. There's also a $10 background check and a $20 application fee. So that's the way that was approved in 2019. Here's the location. Basically, there's a turnaround area kind of between the pavilion and the restrooms, kind of over near the playground equipment. That was what was looked at as kind of being the most suitable for providing 2 to 3 food trucks in Riverside Park. So what does the current municipal code state? I think I've already addressed most of this. Under Chapter 4 of the municipal code, they are currently regulated through special events, commercial activity not being permitted. So again, there would require some special action by the city council to allow for it. There's no action date associated with this tonight. It's really at your discretion. The main cost implications on something like this are going to be, staff time to process the application, to review it. If there's a significant interest, what was discussed in 2019, say there was 6 or 7 operators who are interested in doing it, that was basically left up to the city manager and staff at the time to kind of set up a protocol for how that would happen. First come, first serve, most likely, or, some kind of other rotation that would give maybe, 3 days maximum throughout a 3-month or a 1-month period, so that you provide equal opportunity, if you will, for food truck operators to be able to get there. So your alternatives are there. Of course, there's more alternatives, but kind of those are the 2 main ones that stood out. You could extend the pilot project for the season. You could choose not to allow any food truck activity, of course. And we just have a potential motion there for you, but I think we're just looking for council direction on this.
Any questions for Brad? No.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brad. Is there any public comment on this item? Please come on up and state your name. I think your mic's not on.
Now do you hear me? Yes, you do. Okay. Rika Brown, 1415 Southwest Bridge Street. I actually think it's perfectly ridiculous that food trucks are not already authorized to operate within our parks, at least on some kind of concession basis. I'm reminded of the song Saturday in the Park. I think it was the 4th of July. A man selling ice cream, singing Italian song. Why not? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'll turn it over to council for discussion. Brian.
So I apologize, I had to step out, but it sounds like there's a fee structure currently for ice cream trucks, and there's not a fee structure for food trucks in the park. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do not have a fee structure for concessions in the park, in essence. Yeah, for food trucks in the park. That's one of the reasons why we were thinking trying it as a pilot project. Ultimately, if it's successful and it's something you want to do, council would need to look at some kind of fee structure for this type of program.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion, questions? Val?
I'm just going to go ahead because I kind of agree with Rika. I think this is something that
I'm not sure your mic's on.
was a great idea to
Is your-
move. So, oh, sorry. Oh, it's on. I just need to move
Okay.
closer.
There you go.
I move to approve extending the concessions in the park pilot project for an additional year. So, I'm gonna keep it simple.
Second from Kurt. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Everybody's ready to move on. The motion was to approve extending the pilot project. Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes?
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 7-0. On this next item, we have the option to appoint a member to the Collaborative Economic Development Committee, CEDC, but I wanted to let you all know we have 2 vacancies, 1 application, and if you would like to extend the application period to collect more applications, that is an option, or you can move forward with other action tonight. Valerie?
Well, I happen to know Josh Duvall. He was a student of mine, a wonderful person, and I know his family. So I'm just going to say, he brings some IT. He works in IT field, healthcare. I make a motion that we appoint Josh Duvall to the Collaborative Economic Development Committee.
I just remembered a key bit of information I forgot to tell you, that the CEDC has not yet had an opportunity to provide any input. So just so you know that, if you want to continue with your motion, that's fine as well.
I will continue with my motion.
Okay, so Valerie, we have 1 application from Josh Duvall, and Valerie has made the motion to appoint him to the committee, and Rick has seconded it. Go ahead, Rob.
So are we going to re-advertise to try to fill the other one?
Yes. Okay, so is there any discussion on this motion to appoint 1 person to the committee? Rick?
I think it's important for the committee to be functioning, and if people come forward, to get them on the committee so they can start making progress. So I will be in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Oh, DJ, go ahead.
Yeah, just a general comment. It's a couple years running, we've decided to allow committees just across the board to review their applicants. But I just wanted to say that I think that this wouldn't necessarily be fair. I could be wrong, but correct me. This wouldn't necessarily be fair treatment across the board to all the committees if we didn't allow them to weigh in on new membership.
Further discussion? Valerie?
Well, I would just say that I do know the Collaborative Economic Development Committee has been having a problem making quorum. It's been a real problem for them. And I think having somebody who is enthusiastic and wants to be there, I can't see them not wanting and welcoming that. So from that perspective, being the person who is the liaison, I will say that it has been an issue. So as long as he's enthusiastic and wants to go, I think sometimes we keep putting things out, and that in itself is a problem too. So I'm going to move forward with my motion.
Rob, did you have something?
Yeah, DJ, I definitely appreciate your perspective on that. I know that we have, this would be inconsistent. I'm very willing to vote for Josh Duvall tonight, but it is, I agree with your observation that this is definitely inconsistent. And I'm okay with, well, I think it's inconsistent. I think that assuming that they have enough members to make a quorum without this appointment, I would be in favor of waiting at least 1 month to give them that possibility. Had they been given a chance to make a recommendation?
No, they haven't had a meeting since the time the application deadline closed and tonight. So I would say that this was actually an error perhaps to have put it on the agenda, without allowing for that time lapse. It's something we can correct at a kind of procedural level going forward. And I'm not sure how many times it's been advertised. I don't know if you happen to know. Has it been multiple times? Multiple times
Yeah.
advertised?
And I will also add to that, I mean, the last time we put somebody on there, that person was withdrawn. So they have been going for quite a while with issues with the quorum. I think the last quorum they had was in February going into the meeting, and we had quite a debate about it the last time that we had the meeting. So it has been an issue.
Theoretically, that's also, you can always make the quorum be different than half the members. It could be, the members who are present at any given meeting or something along those lines if we need to.
Yeah, and we did have that discussion, and that discussion will be at the next CEDC meeting. But I do know that, like I said, it has been an issue.
All right, Rick, then Joel.
I also support hearing from the committees, but I feel, based on the comments that Valerie's made, a lack of quorum, and for this committee to start going forward, I feel further delay just moves the can further down the field, and rather than taking action. Thank you.
Joel?
Well, the applicant seems qualified. I think our council liaison, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is that Kurt or?
Valerie.
Oh, Valerie. Okay. Thank you.
All right. I guess just to clarify, I mean, the discussion isn't bearing on the applicant. It's just a matter of how many, you want to have in your pool before you appoint someone, and whether or not you want the involvement from the committee. But right now, we do have a motion on the table to appoint. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Val, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And is DJ still there? DJ?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 7-0. Which brings us to public comment. And this is an opportunity for the public to address the council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item. We have one person signed up this evening, Rika Brown. You want to come up to the mic?
Rika Brown, 1415 Southwest Bridge Street, Grants Pass. I have a dog named Sage who is the son of a lab, and so he likes to swim. We usually go to the river access below the wastewater treatment plant, just east of where the river trail climbs to Spruce Street and drops closer to the river. Lately, we have been unable to go down there because the city has not cut its weeds sufficiently to be safe for dogs and people. This year, the city cut the cheatgrass, foxtails, and star thistle only a few feet off the paved river trail, and cut the foxtails narrowly on the branched paths to the river to a height that would put seeds into shoes and socks. Sage rolled in the cut foxtails above those two trails last week and got seeds into his harness and fur that I had to remove. A star thistle is head high on me, right below the fork in the path upstream. Tall cheatgrass bow gracefully over said path, dangling their sticker seeds and blocking it. This is a place along the river where people could, until this summer, safely take kids and dogs to wade. Fishermen used to use the concrete block and shingle along the shore to fish. The current is out about 20 feet, and the water is shallow and calm upstream and downstream of the fishing block, protected by rocky bars upstream and the block. The next river access downstream has a strong current very close to the bank and is not as suitable for swimming. Sage got swept downstream and thereafter waded close to the bank. The sticker grasses are not so bad, but it is not a good place for dogs or kids. The city has cut off river access to the public with poor weed control, including blackberries along the banks. Cheatgrass is head high along the river trail above the blackberry banks, tall, yellow, and screaming fire hazard for those with eyes to see. I know that the city kills noxious sticker weeds in some places, because I looked at weeds west of the pedestrian bridge to the end of the park, which are at least soft and pretty and have no sticker seeds above the river trail, and few below it on the rough. Blackberries above the trail appear to be cut frequently, having no flowers or old canes. Please get rid of noxious weeds on city property instead of breeding them. Reopen our river access and get serious about killing noxious weeds on all city property. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment tonight? All right. Council, did you want an opportunity to review public comment? Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Rika. I don't know if City Manager Kubik remembers, but I had a conversation with you about Reinhardt Park and the blackberries taking over last year. And this was when we didn't have a park superintendent. And so I was kind of like, well, we'll wait till we get a park superintendent and then we can hopefully get on top of that. So I'm glad Rika reminded me of that. And now that we have a park superintendent, I would really like Parks Department to clean up the whole Reinhardt River access area. The blackberries have overgrown a huge portion of the shore along the river. It's inaccessible. And then all of the issues that Rika has talked about, I think that's well within the purview of a regular maintenance schedule for Reinhardt Park. And I know that we have in the past utilized some, I don't know if I'm gonna get the term right, but labor from the Josephine County Corrections to do some of that clearing. And I know that we have the ability to do that if our current staff is unable to take care of that under their bandwidth. So I would really like to see that happen. Thank you.
Any further comments? Julie, email update?
Council received one email regarding the park exclusion order appeals, one email regarding overgrown properties and fire hazards, and one email regarding public safety funding options.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda tonight, and these are items of such routine nature without controversy that they may be approved in a single action. Is there anything that anybody wanted removed from the consent agenda tonight? All right, Joel, if you would go ahead and read it, please.
Item A, resolution authorizing the city manager to accept the Oregon State Fire Marshal Wildfire Season Staffing Grant Funds. Item B, resolution authorizing a permanent easement and temporary construction easement on property located on the corner of 6th and Vine for installation of ADA sidewalks. Item C, motion approving the Thomas Ford 121 Northeast B Street, a local historic landmark designation findings of fact. Another findings of fact for the Wonderberg and Cafe on 116 Southwest H Street, a local historic landmark designation finding. Motion approving the Arden McConnell 961 Southeast 8th Street, a local historic landmark designation finding of fact. And then motions approving various minutes, the City Council meeting of June 15th, the Parks Advisory Council meeting of May 12th, the Housing Advisory Committee meeting of March 18th, the Housing Advisory Committee meeting of April 15th, the Housing Advisory Committee meeting of May 20th, the minutes of the Historical Buildings and Site Commission meeting of March 10th, the minutes of the Historic Buildings and Site Commission meeting of April 19th, the minutes of the Committee on Public Art meeting of April 12th, the minutes of the Committee on Public Art meeting of May 12th, 2022, the minutes of the Central Business District Vitalization Task Force meeting on May 9th, the minutes of the Central Business District Vitalization Task Force meeting of May 24th, the minutes of the Tourism Advisory Committee meeting of May 3rd, the minutes of the Urban Area Planning Commission meeting of May 11th, the minutes of the Urban Area Planning Commission meeting of May 25th, the minutes of the Urban Area Planning Commission meeting of June 8th, and the minutes of the Collaborative Economic Development Committee meeting of February 24th, and a lot of volunteer hours. With that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second from Valerie. No discussion on this item, so Joel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Matters from Mayor, Council. Council, do you have anything you wanted to bring up tonight? Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask Aaron really quick. We had just discussed the Reinhardt Park weed abatement. Does council need to take action on that, or is that something that the park superintendent is able to handle without further direction?
So we can look at some of the areas they're talking about. I'd like to have a conversation with our Parks Department to determine how much, if we're looking at a full river access, clean all the vegetation out, what that would do from an environmental perspective and what that would look like and why it is the way it is. So it's not a question, an answer that I feel comfortable giving you today.
Okay, so that's something that you can work with park staff and potentially, I don't know if Parks Committee needs to get involved, but I guess we'll hear back at some point.
Yeah, if council as a whole wants to concurs with what you have mentioned and in the spirit of what Rika has mentioned, and that we try to increase river access as much as possible at Reinhardt Volunteer Park, then we will take that spirit of it and move forward with that.
Okay, I would ask other counselors to weigh in, please.
Rick?
I know it can be frustrating, but sometimes Fish and Wildlife can get in there and they just love blackberries, which I hate. So, thank you.
You don't mean the Department of Fish and Wildlife, right? That's just you're talking about the actual Fish and Wildlife? Okay. Joel, did you have something?
In terms of an individual maintenance item, there's a lot of them out there. I was thinking of by the park swimming pool. So what I would like to see is perhaps some of the council members that would like to volunteer with me, and we'll go out and do it. Won't take that long.
Brian?
I appreciate that suggestion. I am an avid volunteer already. I put in so many hours, and the scope of the problem in one of our Keystone parks is beyond what council with some weed whackers can manage. So I think we could help, and I think we could supplement an effort, but I don't think that us out there is going to take care of it.
I think in general, we're going really into some details here. I think what I was looking for is just some consensus on whether or not City Council would like us to try to increase open river access areas at Reinhardt Volunteer Park, and we'll slowly progress to make that happen.
Rob?
I'm definitely in agreement with that. I mean, it's our crown jewel. Let's make it better.
Thumbs up from Rick. Okay, are there other items from council that you wanted to bring up? All right, we have several committee motions on the very last page of your packet today. So we haven't ever really defined exactly a process of how we want to handle these, but I'm just going to read them to you. And then my suggestion is if these are items that you want to take action on, that when we have our agenda setting meeting next week, you bring them up again and we'll get going on them. So we have the Committee on Public Art has made a motion recommending the council allocate $1,500 of available monies to fund the Public Art of the Month feature in the Daily Courier for the next 12 months, fiscal year 23. The Urban Tree Advisory Committee has made a motion to change the tree deposit in Article 11 of the Development Code to $400 per required tree, regardless of the residential zone type. So that's about the current deposit being too low. It's $300. They would like to increase the amount of the deposit. And then the Housing Advisory Committee has made a motion to recommend to the council that due to ongoing absences, the Housing Advisory Committee position designated for a representative from Josephine County be changed to a representative from Josephine County Government or Planning Commission, or for the position to be removed. So those are all some items that we need to consider further. Valerie?
Yeah, I was just asking about the COPA Committee on Public Art. It seems to me that they have a fund, and that's what I was curious, because this talks about going back and asking to use funds from the mayor council account. It was my understanding that they had a account that was actually designated. At some point it came in from private funds at some point, and it's been sitting in an account, and they've occasionally tapped into that and used it for something in the art field. Is that what they're asking to do, or are they asking to go into another account? I'm unclear.
Yeah, COPA had quite a long discussion at their last meeting on this topic. Mindy and Finance actually helped us out by doing some research, kind of almost like a mini audit of COPA funds and prior grants that had been awarded, but they were specific to other projects, not to this particular effort. We do have Cal here tonight representing COPA, by the way.
Yeah.
So the Public Art of the Month was not one of those projects that the prior grant monies that were awarded could go towards. So we don't have any budgeted money to this particular effort. So that, I think that was the reason for the motion, was to ask if council's willing to utilize some of the funds that have been allocated through the city council mayor to allow them to work with the Daily Courier to get this Art of the Month project for this next 12 months done.
Okay, because I do know that they did it before, and they had a chunk of money that was actually had been gone to COPA that was through private monies, and it was my understanding at the time that there was still some of that left. But what you're saying is that there is no money in that particular account anymore that has been used. Is that correct, Cal? And that therefore, because I know that like the art the money for the parking lot art is specifically in that project. The art for the art design for the art boxes is a whole nother batch of money. Right. But I thought that there was a fund that was just, and I'm just going to understanding that's not there anymore. Is that what I'm hearing?
So there are funds available. They're not for that purpose. The only funds that are available right now is Art in Motion.
Okay.
I think that's the key thing, that they have some dedicated funds for Art in Motion, and that's it. So they're wanting to do this project, but the advisory committees usually don't have dedicated funds. They don't have funding. So they're making a request that council consider utilizing $1,500 of your, I believe, $10,000 that you have for committee commission support.
Okay.
Cal, since you were sitting here, did you want to speak on this issue? Or are you just observing this evening?
No, I was told.
You have to come up here.
You have to come up to the mic if you wanted to talk. I don't mean to put you on the spot, just you've sat here all night, so I don't want to.
You just press this? Hello?
Yep.
Well, I was told, I talked to Brad earlier, and he said that we wouldn't be in a position to be able to say, to get up and talk. But yes, no, we've done this twice before, and I left my notebooks in my car because I didn't know how we would have to. Anyway, long story short, we got a grant for one, and we were able to use some funds, but those funds don't exist right now, I've been told, okay? And the committee is like for 4 months in a row voted yes for this project. And then Brad came to our meeting and suggested we go this route. And anything I could tell you more in detail about it, but.
Okay, thank you. I think we have an idea what the project is. We just need to get it on the agenda so that the council can make a decision about allocating funds. Brian?
So is the structure that we're not making decisions on this tonight? Can we make decisions on any of these if we so choose, or do they all have to be taken to workshop? Because if they all have to be taken to workshop, then we should just get it off of this agenda.
I don't think they have to make they don't have to go to workshop, but I would just put it on a regular agenda. This isn't a complicated issue.
Yeah, so the way to do this, to make it as clean as possible and keep in the spirit of transparency, is if council is in agreement with this, you can just go ahead and move forward with the direction. You're not actually doing it, and we would bring forward, maybe say under the consent calendar or something, where you could take action at a future meeting if we had general direction that you're in favor of this.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm generally in favor of all three of these. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a closer look at them, and you can bring them all up again on Monday. This is just an FYI. I mean, it's been clunky trying to figure out how to get these motions in front of you in a way that you will see them without necessarily making you make a decision or take the advice. But we need a mechanism for the advisory committees to provide their information to you. So this is what we've got going for now, is just to have it in the back of the packet.
Yeah, like the mayor said, we're still fleshing out the process, but in this situation, you could provide direction to put one at a future business meeting, one at a workshop, and take no action on another one. So seeking that kind of guidance from these committee motions, we can move things forward to future meetings.
Go ahead.
So is it appropriate to say that, I mean, can we just kind of get gauge a temperature of council on these? Like on the first one, it seems like a no-brainer. The third one, it seems like a no-brainer. The second one seems a little bit more involved to me. So I would be in favor of the first and the third just going on consent at a future business meeting, and then I might need a little workshop item for the second one.
How does the group feel? Do you agree with that? Or if you want to think about this whole process, and we can talk about it next Friday at our meeting, talking about processes, that's fine too. We don't have a path exactly for how to handle these items. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I'd rather have a process to have, one that's a no-brainer, one that's not quite a no-brainer, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's so many gray areas. So I'd rather have a process where we handle them all in a similar manner. And it might only take, us 2 minutes on the no-brainers, but I'd like to still have a similar process for all of them.
Okay, yep, we'll deal with these next week. I think that brings us to items from staff. Did you have items from staff tonight?
Very quick item, just excited to announce that we will have a new fire chief, Keith Larkin, who's former CAL FIRE in the northern region, has accepted the position as fire chief. After the background is cleared, we should have Keith online. I'm guessing 1st of September or something, somewhere around that timeline.
Terrific. Anything else? No?
I just wanted to add on that. So I heard rumor, did we get another planner or no? Is that, we did hire a GIS person, I heard that rumor, so that one is filled. The fire chief is filled. Obviously, we have the finance and the lawyer, so I was just wondering how close we were to getting back up to full bore. So I'd heard, I guess I was reading one of the things in here about there being a possibility of a principal planner, but that didn't happen?
It did not. Do you know anybody?
I was just so excited about it.
We did bring Dennis Lewis back for 20 hours a week to help us out. You know, he's senior planner that's many years of experience in Oregon. So he's going to be coming, he actually started today.
Okay.
To kind of fill in. No, we're 3 failed attempts on the principal planner. We're in a little bit of a lull right now in terms of trying to think about a new strategy with HR.
Okay. Sad.
Rick, I think it's time for you to make a motion. But what motion are you going to make tonight? That's.
I'd like to make a motion, go past 9 o'clock.
Is there a second? Oh, motion died for lack of a second. Let's try again. What motion? Val.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, second from Brian. All in favor of adjourning this evening?
Yay.
Any opposed? All right. Good meeting all, and we will see you Monday.